Hey, what's up? Are you curious about Section 8 and housing vouchers? Well, this video is going to share everything you need to know about Section 8 and housing vouchers. You ready? Let's go.
Let's go.
Hey, what's happening? This is Chris Martin, real estate agent, coach, investor. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and check out some other videos on this channel while you're here. All right, first and foremost, Section 8, and there's this talk out there about whether to have Section 8 tenants in your properties or not. First off, you can't discriminate against someone who has a housing voucher, so it's not even something you can consider. It's everything else that's on the table and maybe qualifying or disqualifying people for other reasons, not because they have Section 8 or they don't have Section 8, right? So one of the first things you want to keep in mind is you should screen your tenants. In fact, if you talk to housing representatives, Section 8 housing representatives, they're going to tell you to make sure that you screen your tenant, whether they have a housing voucher or not. So I never believe the theory out there when you hear people talk about Section 8 tenants are horrible, don't deal with Section 8, it's the worst experience. This comes from people not doing their own due diligence on a given tenant. They should be screening every single tenant across the board. So when you hear someone say that they had a horrible experience, ask them what their screening process was like with that specific person, because I can almost guarantee that they didn't do as thorough of a screening as they should. Now, that's not to say some people don't slip through the cracks. Of course they do. People put on their best performance all the time when they're applying for something, when they're filling out an application. They want their best self to be presented, right? You should start by screening your tenants, because the truth is there's good tenants and there's bad tenants. Whether they're on Section 8 housing or not really is irrelevant. To me, that's actually a bonus. If they're on Section 8 and they're a good tenant, this is actually a benefit to you as a homeowner, as a property owner, as a landlord. It can protect you against economy collapses. When COVID hit the market, when COVID hit the world, it was really like, oh man, are people going to pay rent? In fact, a lot of people didn't pay rent. Well, if you had people in there with Section 8 housing vouchers, you were still getting paid rent. It was guaranteed. And this is all prorated, so depending on the person, their rent is going to be prorated based off of their earnings. Some people get 100% covered by Section 8 and 100% of their rent is covered. Others get 50% or a portion of their rent. So it's all prorated and adjusted according to that person's income. So that's one of my favorite parts about Section 8. You can really protect yourself. If you can place Section 8, good quality Section 8 tenants in your property, you're going to know and feel confident that regardless of what happens in the world, COVID or whatever, you are going to be protected by getting enough rental income. How nice could it be to have your mortgage automatically covered by those housing tenants? So another advantage of having housing tenants in your unit is that you can actually request for rental increases. So you can only do them once a year, and Section 8 actually has set market rates depending on the unit that you're renting or the number of bedrooms you're renting. They already have a pre-approved amount that will go towards that rental. So you'll know that right offhand. If you're renting a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, you can find out what Section 8 is paying for 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms in the areas that you're renting in. So after you screened a tenant and this person is someone that you would feel comfortable having rent one of your units, the biggest con with housing and working with Section 8 is that the process, it takes a little longer than it would if you just approve someone off of the street. So if you approve someone for your apartment off of the street, they give their moving costs, you give them the keys, and you're good to go. With housing, you actually have to get a package, and that package has to be filled out by the owner of the property and then submitted to the housing rep. Once it gets submitted to the housing rep, they process that paperwork and then they issue an inspection. And in order for them to even process that paperwork, you have to get an occupancy permit with your city or town that the property is in. You should be getting occupancy permits anyway. A lot of people don't get them. They're like, what is an occupancy permit? I rented so many units, I never got an occupancy permit. Well, every time you have a vacant unit in a lot of cities and towns, you need an occupancy permit. You can register and apply for that permit through the Board of Health Department in your town or city. They will come out, they'll send someone out, it's $25, $50, they'll send someone out and they'll basically deem your apartment rentable. There might be a few things you need to do here and there, but once you have that occupancy permit, you now have to submit that to Section 8, and they won't even issue their own inspection unless they have that occupancy permit from the city or town. So you have that occupancy permit, and by the way, if there's any issues with the property, this is why it's so important to get that occupancy permit, whether it's a Section 8 tenant or not, is because if you ever face any issues with the tenant and they have litigation or a lawsuit filed against you, one of the first things they're going to see is if you have an occupancy permit or not. And if you don't, you already started off on the wrong foot and things aren't going to be looking too good after that. So I would check with your local city and town, make sure that you are getting that occupancy permit if it's required. Fast forward, housing, they now have their occupancy permit that you supplied to them. They issue their inspection and they send an inspector out. I like to say from the time that you apply or you send in the paperwork for housing, prepare for 3 to 4 weeks of getting that unit approved for and the actual tenant moving in. By the time they send out their inspector, the inspector comes out, they do their own inspection, they may have you fix a few things. Usually it's nothing crazy, but there might be some things here and there they may ask you to fix. That inspector also looks at the amount of the rent that you're asking, and they make sure that that's a suitable amount depending on what market you're in. So they're kind of like they're an appraiser in a way too, making sure that you're charging a fair amount of rent and not asking for something too much. So of course, if you ask for something too low, they're not gonna have a problem with that. But if you ask for something crazy, they may say, well, you're asking for $3,000. Our reports show that this unit should be rented at $2,750 or whatever it is. So once the inspector goes out, gives that unit a thumbs up, like I said, usually they can get that inspector out within a week or two, and then that inspector gives a thumbs up, they set the amount, and then they approve the unit. Once that unit's approved, you can have the tenant move in. Another beauty of Section 8 in housing is they actually give you a direct deposit form. That money gets direct deposited into your account every single month. And as I mentioned before, you can request an increase on rent if the market rates are going up, whether you're asking for an increase in another 2 years or every year or whatever that is. You can go through the process of asking for rental increases to keep up with the market rents. So please do not be one of those owners, those landlords that say, I'm not going to take Section 8 because you heard it from someone who didn't screen properly. Section 8 is a great thing, especially if you have good tenants, and there are very good quality tenants that have Section 8 vouchers, and I've experienced very good luck with those tenants. And just know that do your own screening. You have to have a screening process on what you're doing to plug those tenants into your properties. They have to go through the same channels as anyone else. But do not say you're not going to choose Section 8. That's violating all types of fair housing laws, and you cannot do that as a landlord. So good luck placing your next tenant in one of your units. I hope and wish you guys well, and this is a process, of course. You get better with it as you go, but if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them in the comment section below and check out another video on this channel. Hopefully that was helpful. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.